of business is a members' business debate on motion 22614 in the name of Stuart McMillan on Museum for Human Rights. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Can I ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press their request to speak buttons now, and I call on Stuart McMillan to open the debate. Mr McMillan, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, I'd like to thank all of those who signed the motion to allow this debate to take place, and also those who stayed back to take part in the debate. Now, certainly what I'm going to say today is really only going to scratch the surface of Inverclyde's history in the transatlantic slave trade, but also why the museum should be located in my constituency. And I would like to also thank at this point everyone who has offered to support and provided feedback for the idea. Now, I want to clarify one point at the outset, though, and that's that I do realise that there was the Slave Trade Act of 1807, which prohibited the slave trade in the British Empire. However, it didn't abolish slavery. Slavery continued until the Slavery Abolition Act in 1833, hence the reason I used that date in the motion. Also, according to Black History Month 2020, Scots owned nearly 30% of the estates in Jamaica in 1796 and 32% of the plantations by 1817. I'm going to touch upon just a few themes. First of all, the Parliament's decision in June, Inverclyde's history, the initial proposal as per my motion, and also the actions to date. And certainly, just on that particular point, I will touch upon the fact that Canada possesses the National Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg, which Claire Adamson has spoken about in this chamber before, and I'm sure she'll probably touch upon it again today. But I genuinely believe that that could be very much a positive model for us to look at. Presiding Officer, I wasn't one of the speakers during the showing solidarity with the anti-racism debate in June, but I sat in the chamber and listened to everyone in what was very much a powerful afternoon. I was pleased that the Parliament voted to address our shameful past, a past that we can never change, that some would like to erase our past or keep it confined to the shelves. But we must own up to it and educate future generations and also ourselves about it. We must learn the lessons of the past and find a way that tells the history of the transatlantic slave trade and tells the history of how some of Scotland's wealth was created. It's also worth noting that across the world this debate is taking place, and today's announcement in Barbados should also be noted. I'm not a historian, but a politician, and I can never tell the history like historians, but I can bring to the table politically reasons why my constituency should be the location for such a museum. There are various locations in Scotland that have played a part in the transatlantic slave trade, as well as Greenock, Port Glasgow, and also Glasgow. There was Ayr, Dumfries, Bo'ness, Leith, Dundee and Aberdeen. Greenock and Port Glasgow were the two ports that serviced Glasgow, and with an increasing number of merchants in Glasgow, then the two ports became key in the transatlantic slave trade. I grew up in Port Glasgow, and I remember the town and the stories of it actually being called the Port of Glasgow. Inverclyde's maritime history has many aspects, and many ships have been built over the years. However, our maritime links also include the sugar, tobacco and cotton industries, which also are very much linked to the transatlantic slave trade. Port Glasgow itself was the main port for voyages to Western Africa until the 1750s. Greenock then became the larger of the ports, and this continued in Greenock until 1766. And Greenock became the main port for the trade in tobacco and sugar. It's been reported that in time Greenock became the worldwide port for the sugar trade. But some reports, however, indicate that it was actually just one of the biggest. It's a fact, however, that ships with enslaved people left both Greenock and Port Glasgow. It's known that 2,692 enslaved people were in vessels that left the two ports to cross the Atlantic to work in plantations. And 471 of these people died during these voyages. Presiding Officer, I realise that the number of voyages, the number of people transported and the number of people who died on these voyages might not compare with other parts of the UK and certainly other parts of the UK that, and I use this word advisedly, benefited from the slave trade and also the associated industries, such as Liverpool and Bristol. But that doesn't mean that this part of Scotland's history should be quietly reflected upon. Each of these people were human beings. Scotland's history in the transatlantic slave trade clearly is far greater than just Greenock and Port Glasgow. and it's absolutely right that a museum is created. The fact that Scotland is now prepared to fully face up to and own its past is very much a welcome step. Now, I suggested a museum of human rights to be based at the sugar warehouses at the James Oak Dock in Greenock for a variety of reasons. Firstly, there's the history of the building being part of the sugar industry, which was built on the back of slavery, highlights that the wealth generated through the slave trade and associated industries is still visible today. And secondly, the building is vast, and the opportunity to deliver something of stature educationally is such a strong offer. The building itself could be divided into multiple facilities, including the excellent and innovative proposition from the Clyde Atlantic Trust to create a fully immersive maritime museum. But certainly there would also be space for other activities as well. Thirdly, I believe there will be other parts of Scotland's negative history that could and should be told. For example, the story of the Highland clearances and the 1820 martyrs could be incorporated, both of which have strong local connections. Also the story of why 600,000 Scots left Greenock to go to the New Worlds in addition to those that left Leith. There's also the history of the Irish immigrants to Scotland and how they were treated. Now, these are ideas to get people to imagine what we can achieve, to educate future and current generations. Any museum must have the focus about the transatlantic slave trade and colonialism, as per the agreed amended motion in this chamber in June. However, that doesn't mean that this museum can't touch upon other aspects of Scotland's past. Now, fourthly, the site is located at the historic James Watt Dock in Greenock. Watt himself was not involved in the transatlantic slave trade, but he did profit from it. And fifthly, the educational, the social and the economic opportunities for Inverclyde and Scotland are such that a project of this size can have a transformational effect for my constituency. I studied in Dundee in the 1990s, and to see the change that's happening in that city now is just, it's wonderful. And I'm very proud of the city to actually have this level of ambition. And by placing the museum in Inverclyde, a transformational change could happen involving inward investment, reversing population decline, and becoming a stronger social and economic area. And the Scottish Government's programme for government itself talks about work to start to examine ways to address migration and areas with population decline. And I questioned the Minister, Ben McPherson, this last week at the Culture Committee when he was in front of us, and the museum in Inverclyde could be part of that solution. So far, I've undertaken a number of things. I've spoken to Sir Geoff Palmer and David Hayman. I've undertaken a variety of press activity, which has certainly helped garner some further support. I've also established a short life working group, which includes Ronnie Cowan MP, the Principal of West College Scotland, Scottish Enterprise, the Inverclyde Chamber of Commerce, Creative Inverclyde, the Clyde Atlantic Trust, singer-songwriter Matthew Hickman, and also we're supported by TV presenter Jean Johansson. I also invited the leader of Inverclyde Council to join, and we're hopeful that he can do so once the internal council procedures are fulfilled. I've also spoken with Lucy Cassett of Museums Galleries Scotland, who are taking forward this project for the Scottish Government. Lucy will also be speaking to the Working Party on Monday morning. And the Heritage Lottery Fund have also been engaged with, and they've also agreed to come to speak to the group, virtually of course. Now, we've met 3 times thus far and have an agreed purpose to bring this facility to Inverclyde. Sugar warehouses are what we're discussing today. However, some of the debates we've had and started to consider, Greenock has a number of locations, such as the Glebe, which actually was a sugar refinery, and also the tobacco warehouse, both of which still exist in the town. Also, they're very much just a stone's throw away from each other. Now, Presiding Officer, I'm conscious of time, and I was born in Balwyn-Furness, but I grew up in Port Glasgow. It's still my hometown, even though I no longer live in the town. As a boy, I never knew why, and I never questioned why we had the Kingston Yard in the town. I never questioned why there was a Jamaica Street, a Tobago Street, a Togo Place, and a Virginia Street in Greenock. And I had no idea about the Gourock crest of arms, which has links to the Darragh family, who made their fortune as sugar merchants in Jamaica in the 1700s. This story became quite a revelation to many people locally during the summer. A museum of Human Rights focusing on the transatlantic slave trade in Inverclyde wouldn't be out of place. Sadly, we have many links to the transatlantic slave trade, and I've only, as I say, just touched upon them. But I would like to educate younger generations about the past to certainly improve the future. Presiding Officer, we can use this museum as a foundation stone on which to build a regeneration project that will breathe new life into an area that so needs that helping hand, an area which has suffered many social ills over many decades and is again reeling from the effects of this COVID-19. I believe a new beacon of hope emerging from the clouds of Scotland's past would be a fitting way to honour those lives that were lost and taken by our inglorious colonial history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms Macmillan. Open debate, Claire Adamson, followed by Jeremy Balfour.